You need to have people in your life that recognize your presence, your purpose, and your power. I'll say that again because it's so important. You need to have people in your life that recognize and honor your presence, purpose, and power. So if you struggle with codependency, today I'm going to be sharing with you what codependency is from a spiritual perspective, also how to determine whether or not you are actually codependent, and the number one thing that I did to heal my codependency once and for all. Stay tuned. I've got everything you need to know. What's up, beautiful? It's Lisa Roulette, and I'm here to help you heal, navigate your ascension journey, and create a life you love. The Spiritual Awakening Survival Guide is finally out. You can find it in the description of this video below. If you're new here, this channel is all about helping you navigate your ascension or your spiritual awakening. And if you're on a healing path, there are so many wonderful resources that I've designed for you right here on this channel, including a ton of meditations. Thank you for visiting, and if you're a returning subscriber, welcome back. Without further ado, let's dive right into today's video and talk about codependency. So from a spiritual perspective, codependency is really about having a dysfunctional relationship with yourself. A lot of people will say that it's about having a dysfunctional relationship with another, but I really believe that it's about a dysfunctional relationship with yourself. Now, if the inner critic is all of a sudden coming up and ready to tear you apart, like, oh, I'm such a mess. Listen, the dysfunctional relationship that you have with yourself isn't your fault. It is a direct result of childhood traumas and dramas. So don't beat yourself up about it, but do know that if you are a young adult or an adult in the midst of codependency, you do need to stay accountable for whether or not you're going to perpetuate that codependency. So even though it's not your fault that it develops over time, and it develops over time because it's a delayed stress response, even though that's not your fault, it is your responsibility to take the reins and realize that codependency is never, ever a good thing. Now, how would you know if you were codependent? Well, there are a lot of ways. So one of the primary ways to know is if you struggle with addictions. And by addictions, we can look at any number of addictions to substances like alcohol, nicotine, CBD, marijuana, but also to food, fitness, social media. You might also struggle in your relationships with people pleasing and have self-esteem issues where you invalidate your thoughts and feelings and put other people before you. A lot of people will have at least some level of depression or anxiety, along with a muddy heart and muddy mind. And you sort of always feel like this lack of knowing who you really are. And so you are constantly diverting yourself from knowing who you are and throwing yourself into relationships where you feel like you're validated in some way by the way that person treats you. Unfortunately, most people who are in codependent relationships aren't treated very well. Now, it doesn't mean that someone is necessarily abusive to you, directly toxic to you in some way. But like, for instance, in my codependent relationships, I was always with a lot of enablers, people who would sort of not just enable, but also encourage me to do the things that didn't really serve my highest good. And it made me feel comfortable. Of course, I did also find myself in a lot of abusive and toxic relationships as well. So you just want to be very mindful if you're experiencing anything from addiction to depression, anxiety, people pleasing, invalidating your own feelings. You really want to ask yourself, is this an issue of codependency? And of course, one of the major results of being codependent is that you have very poor boundaries, which if you know this channel at all, you know that I harp on that all the time. It is so important to learn about boundaries. And we're not just talking about mental boundaries or physical boundaries. We're talking about the fullness of a boundary, which is an energetic boundary. And so there's lots of videos, and I'll link a couple in the description of this video below to teach you what energetic boundaries are and actually how to form them. I think there's even a meditation on energetic boundaries. So if you determine that you are codependent, how would you heal it? Well, it's really about remembering who you are, not in the roles that you play, but in your deep soul purpose, and really starting to get in touch with your power. So it requires a level of self-awareness that you may not have experienced so far, because typically when we are becoming self-aware, we're calling ourselves out in the roles that we play. So I'm a mother, I'm a coach, I'm a healer, but that's not really the real me. I am a direct extension of source energy, which is what you are. And in being an extension of source energy, I am a creator. So your true essence is really about creating. And in order to fully understand your capacity to create, you have to shed some of those old identities which come with the roles that you play. Now, this can be extremely uncomfortable, but at the same time, so worth it. Because as you shed those identities and step out of some of the roles that you play, you start to really become your soul coming forth. You start to live through your higher self. And that not only is so grounding and healing, but it is so uplifting, and it gives your life so much more purpose. The biggest challenge with all of this and the process of remembering who you really are as a creator, as a soul, having a physical experience, is that when you go through the process of shedding identities, the people in your life will not like it. But it's really important to remember that if you are to heal codependency over the long term, and you really are going to spring forth into the fullness of who you're meant to be, you need to have people in your life that recognize your presence, your purpose, and your power. I'll say that again because it's so important. You need to have people in your life that recognize and honor your presence, purpose, and power. And if you're in a codependent relationship, it's very likely that that's not going to be the case because you're not recognizing your presence, purpose, and power. So you need to first become self-aware and then become increasingly accepting that the roles that you play are not you, and then step into your presence or your beingness, which can also be a little uncomfortable because as you get to know who you really are, you begin to have this sort of death and rebirth at the same time, which you can imagine isn't always easy. But again, the reward it's beyond words. It's really beyond words. When I healed codependency once and for all, I found my deep soul's purpose, and I started living for my soul's purpose, and it just brought me so much peace, so much joy, and I can really feel the essence of love that springs forth from me, and then I become knowing that I am that love. And that's a really good way to live, especially as compared to being in a codependent relationship. So get to know who you really are. And if you're struggling with that, the Spiritual Awakening Survival Guide will totally help you. In that guide, I teach 3 primary things, which are remembering who you are, remembering where you're supposed to be, and also remembering what you could do if you were really living in your purpose and using your power. So that's a wrap for this video, my friends. If you enjoyed it, please make sure you like, comment, and share because you'll help the channel grow, but you also might help out somebody who is really struggling with codependency as well. Don't forget to stay in the luminosity of your beautiful light, and never forget you are loved.